Not stolen by a hacker, not lost in a market crash, taken by a man who had spent the previous decade telling the public he was a defender of moral decency while quietly running one of the most brazen financial frauds in American history. His name was Charles Keating, and before this story is over, you'll see how he didn't just defraud thousands of ordinary people. He bought the silence of 5 United States senators to do it. Before Lincoln's savings and loan, Charles Keating was already a public figure, but not for banking. In the 1970s, he founded an anti-pornography organization and served on a presidential commission, building a reputation as a moral crusader. In 1984, he purchased Lincoln Savings and Loan, a quiet, conservatively run institution in Irvine, California, for $51 million. Almost immediately, everything about Lincoln changed. Keating fired the existing management and took full advantage of new deregulation laws that had loosened the rules around what savings and loans could do with depositors' money. Within 4 years, he grew Lincoln's assets from $1.1 billion to $5.5 billion. On paper, that looked like explosive growth. In reality, it was reckless. Keating funneled depositors' federally insured savings into speculative real estate deals and high-risk junk bonds, the kind of investments a traditional savings and loan was never supposed to touch. Here's where the story gets darker. Lincoln wasn't just selling risky investments to outside investors. Bank branch employees were trained to steer ordinary customers, including elderly retirees walking in to make a routine deposit, into buying uninsured junk bonds issued by Keating's parent company. These customers believed they were buying safe, insured products. They weren't. They were buying paper that was only as good as Keating's crumbling empire. By the mid-1980s, federal regulators in San Francisco started to notice the warning signs and began investigating Lincoln's practices. This is the moment most fraud cases end, the moment regulators close in and the operation collapses. But Keating didn't fold. He fought back, and the way he fought back is what turned this from a regional bank failure into a national scandal. Keating had spent years building relationships with powerful people in Washington, partly through over $1 million in campaign contributions to sympathetic senators. In 1987, when regulators began moving toward shutting Lincoln down, Keating called in that favor. 5 U.S. senators, Alan Cranston, Dennis DeConcini, John Glenn, John McCain, and Donald Regal, personally met with federal regulators to pressure them into backing off the investigation. It worked. The regulators delayed action, and Lincoln stayed open for 2 more critical years. During those 2 years, Keating kept selling junk bonds to customers who had no idea the company underneath them was already collapsing. When the Resolution Trust Corporation finally seized Lincoln in April of 1989, it was too late for over 21,000 investors. Many were elderly retirees who had trusted their local bank branch with their entire retirement. The losses to investors topped $285 million, and the federal government was ultimately forced to cover $3.4 billion in total losses from Lincoln's collapse. The fallout extended far beyond Keating himself. The 5 senators who had intervened on his behalf became known publicly as the Keating Five, and a Senate ethics investigation that lasted over a year scrutinized their conduct. Only one senator, Alan Cranston, was formally found to have engaged in improper conduct. John McCain, one of the most prominent figures in the scandal, would later call his involvement the worst mistake of his life, going on to testify against Keating in civil litigation brought by Lincoln's bondholders. Keating himself was convicted of fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy, and was initially sentenced to a combined 22 years in prison. His convictions were later overturned on appeal due to legal technicalities involving jury instructions, but he ultimately pled guilty to reduced charges and was ordered to pay over $150 million in fines and restitution. He died in 2014, having spent his final years largely out of the public eye. What makes the Keating story different from most financial frauds isn't just the scale of the money. It's that when the system that was supposed to catch him got close, he didn't run and he didn't hide. He simply purchased the people whose job it was to stop him. For thousands of elderly Americans who trusted a familiar bank branch with their life savings, that purchase cost them everything. Tomorrow, we're covering a fraud that ran for over a decade inside one of the most respected accounting firms in the world, hidden in plain sight by the very people paid to catch it. Subscribe so you don't miss it.